This podcast is made possible by the generosity of listeners and viewers like you. Kindly consider a contribution through Patreon or PayPal. Links are in the details box. Any amount is appreciated. And follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The handle, The Beirut Banyan. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And to stay updated with video releases, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. I'm Rani Shatar, and this is The Beirut Banyan.
I don't think the journalist's job is to defend the case of a country. The journalist's job is to give, it's an access for information, it's to give people the information they need to know. And they can make their own opinion. Now, you have to do that in the most authentic, noble way possible. But I don't think the journalist's job is to change someone's mind. Unlike what you do, I suppose, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's true.
Yeah. What you do is you make sense of all the information that we give, and you form an opinion, and you try to be as honest about it, and you try to persuade people, or express it as honest as possible, and you try to persuade people with it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is absolutely true.
I was asking for you to explain what you do exactly. How do you see the difference between a journalist and your job?
That's really funny. Someone asked me this just outside a few minutes ago. Were you telling them to ask?
Oh. Yeah, maybe. I have people everywhere.
So we can get into this a bit, and we can keep it a bit loose tonight. And feel free to ask me too. I want this to be both of us together. I get offended when anyone considers me a journalist, because there's a lot of training, and you got some of the best training thanks to Abby, sitting in the back. I don't have that. I'm not a reporter. I'm not doing the endless fact-checking or sourcing or the grind. I'm just taking all of that, digesting it, and you're absolutely right, trying to make sense of it. But that journey is not a journalist's journey. And when I write, I'm not writing reporting. I'm writing opinion, or what I think of as analysis, which leans on opinion. So you're absolutely right. There's a lot of skill involved in being a journalist. I'm not a journalist.
Which brings the question, how do you choose the media outlets that you read?
How do I choose the media outlets?
Which media outlets, and how do you choose? Like right now with the war, for example, which media outlets are you mostly following? You said in Lebanon.
L'Orient today.
Okay.
And to be fair, this is Beirut as well.
Okay.
I don't read French, so ici Beirut translated. Yeah.
So
I do read, this is going deeper, I read the journalists abroad working in international companies covering this war. I do look for them.
Okay.
And this can be regional or sort of London-based or New York-based.
And do you still see them as the same credible people as before the war, given the bias that we are seeing in Western media nowadays?
The reporters or just the talking heads?
Both. The reporters and the newspapers they work at.
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I have I don't have enough insight, I think, to know the evolution of the standard from individuals. But I think L'Orient today is doing as well now as it did a month ago. And I know L'Orient today is in good hands. And I actually know that some of the former journalists are here. They work in different outlets now. But I like those outlets more thanks to them being in L'Orient today. So that I think the standard remains high. But
local media outlets.
Well, that's local.
Yeah, but the Western journalists, the ones who work in international media outlets that you mentioned, do you still trust them as before?
I don't.
The outlets they work in, the newspapers, and themselves, given what we are seeing nowadays.
In reference to how they cover that conflict?
Given the obvious bias of Western media nowadays.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I don't think their bias has changed a month ago till today. It's the same. It's the same way of covering that story. That hasn't changed that much. Are you asking in a bigger picture?
Yeah. Like, so you're saying your perspective on them has not changed because the bias has not changed. But I guess it's more, I mean, to the general public, the bias is more clear now. And I do think it's different because in times of peace, newspapers that are funded by corporations or funded by whatever, maybe they allow their journalists to have more independency than they would in times of war. Times of war are more critical. So that independency sometimes disappears, like in times of war, disappears. Yeah, what do you think?
I think you know them better than I do and how they've covered, and you probably follow them deeper than I do. I haven't seen a shift in bias, personally.
Okay.
But that's my experience. And those that I didn't trust before, I don't trust them now.
Okay.
And those that I leaned on before, I continue to lean on. So that hasn't changed that much.
All right.
And to be fair, 90% of what I read is Lebanese reflection on what's happening too. The 10% is constant. I'll give you an example. Kim Ghattas, she writes for The Atlantic sometimes, but she's mostly on television and occasionally on CNN. She's that kind of journalist that I continue to trust fully. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. But her reflections today are as impressive as they were before.
No, it makes sense. Like the journalist would build credibility over time.
I sat with Dalal Mawad a few weeks ago. I think of her the way I thought of her before.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking about outlets and how they cover, it's the standard practice to me. I don't expect more or less. That's pretty much how I've seen them cover this conflict for years.
I see, but the bias that already exists before, does it make you more uncomfortable now? Does it make you view the world as like as an unfair world, like nowadays? Because for me, like maybe the bias hasn't changed, but whatever is happening in Gaza, the coverage of Western media, it makes you think what kind of world we live in, no? Like.
It's because we're apart in age. We said this on MTV. You're in your 20s, I'm in my 40s.
Yeah.
Although you're turning 30 in a few days.
Yeah.
So it's still, I can still say you're in your 20s. I think it's just adjustment to this for a very, very long time.
You think it's still the same case?
The pitch is so severe right now, but it's not new. That's, I guess, what I'm saying.
Yeah. I understand. Speaking of the media coverage of Gaza and what's happening in Palestine, part of the subjects we agreed to talk on is Palestine. The meaning of Palestine to both of us.
By the way, just to interrupt, we were doing something like this at MTV. The makeup artist went to Wael and started changing his makeup and his pitch.
That was supposed to stay a secret, but carry on.
It was a very emotional moment, and then literally there's makeup on him. I have a photo for blackmail. And you were still smiling while you were, in the makeup. Yeah, so no makeup tonight. Back to the issue.
Thank you, Ronnie,
Sure.
for this very important information.
If anyone needs to blackmail you, I've got some good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So what were we talking about?
Palestine.
Yeah, Palestine. What does Palestine mean to you? And did it change during recent events?
Well, that's a huge question.
Yes, we have time.
We have time. Are you the host? You're the host tonight. Yeah. When does this finish with? Okay. If with your permission, I'll answer it, but then I want to hear it from you too, so we can do that back and forth. It's a huge question that I don't think you can answer in one setting.
Yeah. I'm sure you can summarize as much as possible. You've been doing this for a while.
I'll edit. Yeah. I think this may not be a popular position to take. For me, over time, not when I was younger, later in life. I think there's a separation, in my opinion, between cause and people. And I've seen that expand rather than contract. So, for example, you can cheer and celebrate and even fully believe in Hamas's operation. You can fully endorse it. You can even find ways of supporting it. You can do this in Gaza. You can do this here. You could do this anywhere on the planet. And then you can also not give a shit about Palestinians. Sorry for the cursing. And we have, over 100,000 Palestinian refugees here. I don't remember the last time anyone fully supporting an operation gave 2 cents about refugees in this country. So I've seen this grow. I've also seen, and this is not like a black and white thing. There's shades of this in the middle, but I think over time, the cause became international. A lot of people cheer this cause on, usually for other reasons that are attached to it. I'm not very comfortable when I see every slogan on the planet with the Palestinian flag attached to it.
Why not?
Why not? I think it robs it of its true meaning, which is a dispossessed people that deserve far better. Not global warming, not a Scandinavian protest, and not a marginal issue that may attract some people in liberal universities and has nothing to do with Palestine. So that I've seen grow over time.
You mean the holding of the flag of Palestine in any protest, or like in nowadays pro-Palestine protests?
Marxists for Palestine, or whatever. Every other cause, free Tibet, free Palestine. It's almost like the worldwide victim, and you attach yourself to it, maybe to get a footing on the scene. I don't like that because I think it robs Palestine of its meaning. This is, again, my opinion.
Yeah.
And again, there's shades in the middle, and there's good intentions too. It's not that these are bad intentions. On the other side, I think nuance is dead. Real nuance. And sorry to make this more personal to me. Wael is the
Allah yesterday.
is the replacement guest. That's why we're doing 2 episodes back to back. We do love each other, but there's another reason. The guest that was meant to be here, his name is Bashar Haidar. He's an AUB philosophy professor, accused of being a Zionist. And I think falsely accused, and some phrases yelled at him, inciting hate. He is by far the most sensible professor I know at AUB, and was doing his academic duty as a philosophy teacher. He made one decision to invite an American philosopher, an American Jewish philosopher, to talk about Israel and the bigger question of war ethics. That's not Zionism to me. So nuance is gone. And I think he deserves better than to be hiding at home. So I've seen that disappear. And also, sorry for the long answer.
No, please.
I've seen myself change my tune of many things, including what exactly Palestine means on a personal level. As an 18-year-old, it's the flag above my bed. In my early 20s, it's reading Robert Fisk and pretending to understand everything he's saying. In my later 20s, it's picking up Edward Said books and never reading them, but they mean a lot. It's even, I'll go more personal, manning a kiosk when Edward Said died in my university campus in the US. A member of Students for Justice in Palestine. I did this. I didn't really know what it was, but I did it because it felt right. I think over time, you grow into realizing this is not the most important cause in the universe, but the people deserve something better. And the cause may be more detrimental when it's perverted. And I've seen every bad actor attach themselves and make this conflict worse. So that's my long story short, in that it's not black and white.
I can totally relate to these bad actors that attach themselves to this cause when they mean bad things. So
and we talked a bit about this on MTV.
Yeah, a little bit of my background. My family, from my mother's side, were involved in the secular resistance against Israel back in the days. They were part of the Lebanese Communist Party. And
just people standing, if you want, come to the front. There's seats empty if you don't want to stand in the back. No? Okay.
think they are
There's
comfortable.
all these empty seats here.
Yeah. So they were part of the Lebanese Communist Party, and they didn't just want the liberation of the South. I think they believed in the liberation of Palestine back then. And so I come from that background.
Yeah.
As you said, the view on Palestine changes over time, and because there's so much attachment to the cause from people who have bad intentions. Yeah, you yourself. I mean, personally speaking, at some point, whenever I see someone advocating for Palestine, at some point, not right now, it gave me allergies. My immediate reaction would be they are hypocrites, because that case was used in the Arab world by every dictator. The case of Palestine to suppress their own people. In the name of Palestine, we justify why Arab countries have no electricity. We justify the dictatorships of these countries. In Egypt and Syria, there was an emergency state, and they used this emergency state to justify the suppression of their own people. And the justification for it is liberation of Palestine, or the existence of Israel. So but over time, I think I personally went back to my humane self, which is that in spite of these bad actors, there is a cause there. These people have been living very hard conditions. They have been living under occupation or siege or whatever. So, and that came before, years before the war, but especially now, because we've I remember, I wasn't born in 1982 when the Israeli occupation happened. So my memory of Israel was in 1996. I was very young, the war. 2006 was a memory. I was a child, but it wasn't as aggressive as what we are seeing nowadays in Palestine. So I think the closest I was, and the most empathetic I was with the Palestinian case, is nowadays.
Mm.
And I personally, speaking about being a journalist and being affected by what's happening, yeah, you are more, you see, you cannot escape the news, you cannot escape sensitive stuff that are happening every day. But, and as much as I try to avoid sensitive videos, because they get to me, you cannot escape them. And these days, on a personal basis, and I'm not unique in this. I think a lot of people cannot go on with their lives while with what's happening in Palestine right now. So, tell me more about this yourself. Are you feeling the same way? Can you go out normally the way you used to before October 7?
I had many guests cancel because they didn't feel it was appropriate to speak. Actually, Samir and we had an event in the mountains. The guest said, it's not the right time to talk about anything. That could be a valid argument, perhaps, but I personally prefer talking through the issue and actually challenging the pain head on than taking a stand of silence. 2 weeks ago, Salem Zatari was sitting here, and he had decided early on for the first few weeks to remain silent, and then he let it all out on this podcast. So everyone has the right to express themselves the way they choose. But nuance and facts, and in my opinion also narrative, are at stake. Because when you see this level of pain, this is why I wanted to get back to this. When you see this level of gore, there is an inertia in Lebanon in particular to go back to what feels right. And it's a feeling. It's not true. It's a feeling. And there's a certain segment and a certain group in this country that is winning, long-term, winning back that feeling. I don't trust it. I don't trust any group right now in this country that's pretending to care about Palestinians and has been so involved in destroying Lebanon. And that's where my narrative gets a bit, I get in the weeds a bit, is trying to dissect what is a huge geopolitical issue based in this country, and also make sure that they're not winning over any minds. That's where I see a fault line.
Let me ask you a question. If it's Because I think the group you are talking about is Hezbollah, no?
It is. And can I say one more thing and then you have the mic? It's quick to forget Syrians have killed more Palestinians in Lebanon. Syrians have killed Palestinians in Syria. Syrian meaning the Syrian army. They cannot get off the hook when Bashar al-Assad is attending Arab League summits. This man is a murderer. He's killed Palestinians and he's bombed them to death. I don't know if it's better or worse than what the Israelis are doing. It doesn't matter. But this man cannot get away with it. He gets away with it. In this country, I think we should be more careful not to let that group get away with winning over minds simply because they're practicing constraint and targeting sites as they choose. We need to go deeper into that and not give them a pass. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get into which regime was worse to Lebanon, the Syrian regime or Israel, but
I meant Palestinians have been killed by the Syrian regime.
to Palestinians or to Lebanon. But let me ask you a question. So, like Palestine right now needs solidarity, it needs support, obviously. If it's not the way Hezbollah is doing it, through a military way, how would Lebanon support Palestine?
Before we go there, I wanted to ask you. I'll answer that question, but I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, it's a race between us.
It's a race, yeah. What does Palestine mean to you?
Oh yeah, I think I answered this.
No, you said it in a secular household that you've become more embracing on a humane level. But right now, that word, what does it mean to you?
It means.
You see the frustration when you
yeah.
get asked the same question?
No, I think it's an easy feeling. No, I'm on the these allergies I was talking about. Right now, with these circumstances, they are not there anymore. I am on the Palestinian side. These people are struggling. Whoever is claiming to support Palestine, and they are either hypocrites or not, it doesn't affect me. I'm seeing the atrocities that are happening. I'm seeing the unfairness. Unfortunately, the whole world is watching and not doing anything. What does Palestine mean to me? It means something very unfair. Maybe the last colonial version in the world. And it needs to end. Hopefully it will. I don't know. Hopefully it will end. We can lean on. The only hope we have, I guess, is the protests in Western countries and European countries, and especially in the US. I think this is what we should lean on. This is the only hope that something would change. Because, military-wise, I don't think either Palestinians or other factions in the region have the capability. There's a gap in military power. I don't think they are capable of liberating Palestine or not liberating. I don't mean we should throw them in the sea, no, but bringing the rights of the Palestinians through a military action. I don't think it's possible.
So I'll answer the question you asked, but let me go back a bit into what you just said. For me, it is still striking, even though weeks have passed, to see hundreds of thousands of American Jews take to the streets in defense of Gaza. That to me was an important occasion. And that shows what we said earlier, that even when media is playing the same tune, people are waking up a bit. And it is profound. It could be just in the US, but it really doesn't matter. There are American Jews saying no to Netanyahu. And I think that is a certain signal that is new in an otherwise conflict that is mostly polarizing. So I'll say that. I was impressed by that. Going into what is the solution, I mean, that question has been asked every single cafe, every single bar, every single household, every single episode. No, Hezbollah is not the Lebanese army. And I don't care if it's weak or strong. The Lebanese army should be in the south. And it's not for me to say that that's correct or not. That's 1701. That's a UN Security Council resolution which simply defends the right of the Lebanese state. And that's what ended our version of this bloody mess in 2006. So we're not better than a Security Council resolution. Hezbollah is not does not have a higher moral ground than that. So no, for me, there's no excuse to have that group operating the way it does. And it's so silly to see the UN Special Representative trying to talk about 1701, and she trips over it. I don't think she's a very good communicator, and Hezbollah is full out on display.
Yeah, but the question was, if it's not through Hezbollah's way, in what way can Lebanon support Palestine? In your opinion?
Support Palestine.
Yeah.
I think you don't end. You start by, you give Palestinians in Lebanon some dignity.
Yes.
It starts there. I don't care for demographic concerns or prejudice or outright hostility or history. Damour is 50 years ago. Damour is 50 years ago. Sabra Shatila is 40 years ago. You can give Palestinians some dignity. There's no excuse. They still, until today, don't have fair access to anything. And it's not like Lebanon is a golden example of statecraft. Let them at least enjoy what we have left. For me, this is it's a starting point. It's not a final point.
This is one of the points I fully agree with you on. I think there are lots of parties who advocate for the rights of Palestinians.
How can you have
and Palestinians? Yeah.
No, but worse. UNRWA is to blame too. UNRWA is to blame. How can you have a refugee camp 80 years later? It's 3 generations. How many Palestinians are in Lebanon that left Palestine? A handful. And I think a lot of them actually left over time to third-party countries. So what are we doing exactly? You can't even tell where Burj Barajne begins and where Shatila ends. Ain al-Halwa, you know it because it's walled off. But you go to Dubai, there's a Palestinian camp there. You don't know where it is. People go looking for it. That's silly.
Yeah, fully agree.
It's not silly. That's, to me, Palestine. Palestine, to me, is people first. Otherwise, there's no cause. A cause is sexy. I don't think this is a sexy issue. I don't want posters of Arafat, or you know what? I don't like it when Greta Thunberg wears her keffiyeh. It makes me uncomfortable, because that's Palestine gone wild. No, help some people here. We have Palestinians. We don't talk about it. It's like a no. Palestine is Hamas right now, not 100,000 people.
This is a very leftist solution for someone like you, Ronnie. But I
think it's pragmatic.
Yeah. No, I fully agree on this point. I think for the parties who advocate for the rights of Palestinians and Palestine, and I think the majority of Lebanese want to support the Palestinians. Lebanon has the capability of supporting the Palestinians in a way, which is giving these people the rights. So I think...
the minimum rights. You don't have to go all the way to make Lebanon bend over backwards for every refugee either. But you have to give dignity back to these people.
Yeah, and I think it's obvious that these people are not given... It's roughly 200,000 people, I think.
It's less now. It's less.
Yeah, because a lot of people traveled. Yeah. Unlike the Syrian refugee population, which is over 1 million, the Palestinian population is around 200,000. So I think if there's an intention, these people should get their rights. If Lebanon wants to start somewhere, I agree.
Lebanon offered Palestinian Christians citizenship.
Yeah.
Professors at AUB are professors at AUB because of that prejudice.
This is exactly why these Palestinians are not given their rights, because that's a sectarian issue. Because if these Palestinians can vote, then...
You have to give dignity back to people first. Beyond that, how do you support people in Gaza from here? Your options are very limited. There's all this literature on whether boycotts work or not. I don't know. Are you hurting the Lebanese economy more than you need to? I'm not sure. I don't think throwing rocks into Starbucks is the answer. I don't think vandalism works. I don't think trying to do some cosmetic damage to AUB is the answer. And I don't think chasing an AUB philosophy professor helps the cause one bit. So that kind of extreme mumena, to me, is silly. Lebanon is a country. It's not a wild nightmare. You should be able to offer at least a modicum of nuance in the debate here. But how do you help Palestinians at large? Palestinians deserve a state. Palestinians deserve to end this nightmare. And Lebanon does not have a seat at the table to that discussion. The Americans do. Maybe to a lesser degree, some Gulf countries have a say now. Maybe Iran is listening more than it used to. But the answers are there, not here.
Why not? Because Lebanon is weak, is not strong enough
No,
to,
because
to sit on the table.
Hezbollah is a curse to Palestine. If this is the wild card, it's going to it destroys Palestine and Lebanon together. We should not be hosting that. That is not Palestine for me.
I see. Should we get to the Q&A?
Wait. We have 10 more minutes. Hold on.
How do you know?
Because I
You've
timed
not.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 7:20.
All right.
How do I know? Been doing this
It
for
was
7
off.
years. Yeah, but that's how I turn it back
All
on.
right. Good for you.
I am really afraid he's going to take my hosting job at MTV. You're very charismatic on television too. So, yeah.
You should tell my brother and sister. They disagree. They are here.
You're kidding me. Really? The family?
And my cousin on the left.
Oh, great. Excellent.
Yeah.
But they're so handsome. How did you end up It's not my right to say, get a haircut. No, I'm kidding. You give me legitimacy to keep my hair long. Yeah. You wanted to get into the issue of freedom of expression here compared to the West. That was one of the talking points you wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
So let's go there. You were suggesting it's suppressed abroad.
Yeah. I'm not suggesting. It's true. Like
That's cool. Yeah.
the protests that are pro-Palestine, especially in Germany, they are labeled. They are unlawful as far as I understand, because they are framed in a way that they are anti-Semitic. But impressively, they are still happening. This is when it comes to the protests, but I'm hearing like it's from Americans, from people living in whatever European country, that it's now today's time is very similar to post 9/11 times, which is when you someone wearing the hijab would be given a very hard time. Someone saying Alhamdulillah would be given a very hard time. And nowadays, people who claim to be advocates of freedom of expression, very famous people like Jordan Peterson and Piers Morgan and people like them, their whole identity is freedom of expression. But when it comes to the Palestine issue, where freedom of expression is thrown in the bin, we're not hearing them talking about it or in any way. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of bias in there from countries who preach freedom of expression in the region, and they start wars over it. But when it comes to when it matters, when freedom of expression matters, they behave this way nowadays. I think it's a lot of we're learning about a lot of hypocrisy from these countries.
So Germany's laws are a bit odd in that they're trying to hold on to a certain history check from the 1940s and applying it to protests today in a way that seem unsettling, and it ends up being counterproductive rather than, I think, what their intent was at the beginning. Other than the German example, and you mentioned Piers Morgan, I don't know, we can get into this a bit. I don't like Piers Morgan being the conversationalist about Gaza. I don't think he deserves this mantle.
So he doesn't, but let me tell you something about Piers Morgan. The bar is so low. Piers Morgan seems like the rational voice on this. Seems like the most fair person talking about this. That's how mainstream media in the US, as far as I follow, is
He's based in the UK, right?
Yeah,
His show is British.
The UK as well. That's how low the bar is. Someone like Piers Morgan, who we know is probably not an honest actor, can reap the situation as being the most fair host.
I had this moment with Salem Zatari. He works quietly with Bassem Youssef. So they have a long relationship. He felt it was the right way to do it. I didn't like watching Bassem Youssef on Piers Morgan.
Which
felt-
time? Because there are 2 times.
I didn't watch the full second episode. I watched the first one, and I didn't know if it felt like popcorn. It felt like I'm going to the movies. This is a war happening next door, kind of. And I didn't. Bassem Youssef has his way, but I don't know if he was the right person for this message. Almost felt like it distracted. It became more about how to debate rather than really what's happening. But it seems to have taken off. And I still don't watch Piers Morgan. Even when he gets pro-Palestinian voices, some of them are defiant. I don't like the give and take with him.
Okay. Well, why not? Like as a host, because I'm curious.
Because that's entertainment first. It's not...
Yeah, exactly. He's not.
Yeah.
He's there for the clicks.
He's there to create a war, actually. Actually, he's taking the war and bringing it on your phone. Yeah. I don't need to hear people shouting. And I think if Bassem Youssef wants to have a principled take, you can't be confrontational with him. That was the whole thing. It's almost like it's boxing.
Yeah, just a small comment about this. I think Bassem realized that you cannot be confrontational with him. So that's why he was sarcastic all the time.
Right. And that's why he did the second one.
But that's why he was sarcastic in the first episode, because you cannot confront Piers Morgan except with this attitude.
That's interesting.
So yeah.
One more topic, and you mentioned you wanted to talk about it. It's more personal to you. You wanted to talk about the feeling of liberation in the South.
Yeah.
Pre-2000, the notion of wanting liberation, and then 23 years later, what it means right now. So I'll let you start here. You hinted at it already. You were young when all of these things were happening.
Yeah.
But there's an emotion tied to that.
It's not a personal emotion. It's more so the situation that we're now here talking about this, maybe having a drink, and the bar is full. But we sometimes forget that Lebanon is a part of Lebanon is at war every day. These border villages, most people are displaced from their villages, and it I was a kid. It's very similar to the times of the pre-2000 times, when these villages were occupied. A lot of them couldn't even go to their villages, and it even precedes that, even before the 1982 occupation. As far as I understand, the PLO used to launch operations from the south, like Hezbollah does today. So I'm actually in the process of writing something about these people who were displaced from their villages and what liberation meant to them. And if today's time reminds them of the pre-2000 days, I will briefly go through it because I don't want to spoil the article that's being written. But someone who's old, like he was in his 60s, he was talking about the humiliation he faced during the Israeli occupation, and how even Lebanese people who were affiliated with the Lahad, with the Southern Army at the time, South
Lebanese.
Yeah, exactly. How they abused their affiliation with the Israelis to humiliate their own countrymen. And he talked about how he's attached to Ait al-Shab. He's from Ait al-Shab, and how even when he traveled outside the country, he always had the urge to come back. And he even bought a house in Beirut, even though he has a house in Ait al-Shab, because the situation was unstable. Like, he had to have a house in Beirut. When he described his feelings when the liberation happened in 2000, it was honestly, it got to me. It's the most emotional I've gotten in an interview, and I understand why some people would support Hezbollah, because I understand. I'm not saying. I understand every person who supports Hezbollah, where they come from, but I understand someone like him, why they would view Hezbollah as the savior of this country.
Let me play with that just a bit, and then we'll go to a break. You mentioned earlier this family of secular resistance to Israel, and those were the first victims of Hezbollah, as Hezbollah grew. And that is an untold story, I think, in that when everyone was cheering Hezbollah on a national level, their local opponents were being decimated. This is a stretch of time. You flip it out on the other side. Has your own reflections of this group changed too? Meaning, are you able now to it's not about humanize, it's not that. Everyone humanizes everyone. It's not that. It's that you're maybe opening up because you see a population being attacked and you see a group that you know defending them, maybe cosmetically, but still doing something. Has your view changed?
I mean, you touched on that in the latest interview at MTV. You said that for you, a Lebanese forces voter or supporter is the same as a Hezbollah supporter. You don't blame the people. I personally was never a hater of Hezbollah, to be honest. You mentioned victory, but in my mind, it's civil war times. Everyone was fighting with everyone. And that page has, we we bypassed it. So I was never that, angry at Hezbollah. I always viewed them as a political party in Lebanon. I'll tell you what, as a journalist, the pre and after, I now understand that Lebanese, in my opinion, the Lebanese politics is so complicated. It's not only about Hezbollah. In spite of the fact that it's a very strong party, Lebanese politics is so complicated. It goes beyond Hezbollah. So that changed. When you know more about what's happening in detail, getting into the details of things, I think I view it more as not a Hezbollah problem, but a Lebanese politics problem.
So I'm going to try to wrap up the episode in a way that honors you. Is that a joke to some people? In a way that reflects what you do for a living as well. You're not the only journalist in this room. There's many journalists watching this. Long ago, I have to give credit to Robert Fisk. He introduced me to Sabra and Shatila. And if I ever had an inclining for that community's suffering, whether or not it's his version, whether or not it's his bias, it doesn't matter. A master storyteller, a fantastic book that stands the test of time, Pity the Nation, an Irish journalist in Lebanon. That book in hand takes me to Shatila. So I'm seeing what he wrote about, and you can only feel what he felt. I had a brief stint in a group called the Nejde. It's a women's technical training school in Burj Barajne. I don't know if it's still there. I dabbled with these things long ago. I mentioned this to you in private once. I was part of a collective called Samidun. I think they're communists. All they were doing was aiding victims from the July 2006 war. Hygiene kit distribution. Robert Fisk took me to that cause. And I almost started a career thanks to that work. Anthony Shadid, you're probably too young to know him. Well, yeah, you are too young to know him. This is when I was older than you when I last saw him. Everyone, I think, who's older than you, but younger than me too. Anthony Shadid was a professor at AUB and a journalist for the New York Times. He wrote a book called House of Stone. House of Stone took me to Marjayun. It took me to the south. So I suddenly appreciate more and feel more with the South, thanks to a professor at AUB that you can talk to and access right away. May 2000, I remember this, getting a watermelon and throwing it over. Everyone was doing this all the time without care. You could wave your Hezbollah flag and not be part of Hezbollah. So all those feelings are real. But I think when you're trying to reflect on your own emotions later in life, it's those journalists that I remember, the way they shaped narrative that took me to those places. What I took from that later is my own personal journey. But for better or worse, journalism in times of crisis is still essential. And thankfully, the Lebanese economy, despite its complete collapse, did not take with it Lorient today. And I'm really honored that you're sitting with me again to talk about your career. And a shout out to Abby Sewell, if she's still in the back. She deserves it. They all deserve it. Mohammed al-Shama, I don't know if he's still here, who's now at the Washington Post. I did some of my best episodes when he was there. And there's others as well I'm not listing. But anyway, thankfully the economy did not kill free expression, and you're doing a fantastic job. So let's take a 10-minute break, order some drinks. Q&A will begin afterwards. Thank you, Wael.
Thank you, Ron.
Do your bedtime voice.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin. May we please have your attention again? Thank you.
Wow.
This was special.
So do they make love or do they fall asleep?
Up to them.
Hopefully not in the reverse order. Wow. Silence.
Yeah, let's make use of that before it goes away.
So there's a microphone that will be passed around. You feel free to ask anything you'd like to either one of us. I forgot to do one shout out because I didn't see her before. The woman in the red sweater, Marie-Josée Daoud. She's the current editor at Lorient today.
Features editor.
Features editor, yeah. So that's a shout out to her because I think she deserves it too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. She gives us chocolate all the time, and I want to make sure we give her credit for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
كيفو ميشيل؟ بعد ما شفتي؟ Okay, good. All right. So, any questions you'd like? Anyone have a question up front? The gentleman.
You implied that Lebanon doesn't have a seat at the table and suggested that military responses are not what's required. Considering that we're one of the very few countries at the border and that the Human Rights Watch and the UN are suggesting that Israel is committing war crimes, isn't a military threat or just a deterrent force for good in a situation like this when we witness ethnic cleansing and possible ethnic cleansing and possible genocide? Aren't people who are able to do something supposed to do something about it? So, yeah.
It's a question for both of us or
Yeah, for both.
both? Should I start?
You can answer.
Maybe the analogy is not the one you want to hear. In the 1967 war, which changed the Middle East forever, Israel occupies the West Bank and Gaza Strip permanently thereafter. They annex the Golan Heights, and they even occupy Sinai Peninsula. Not one shot was fired on the Lebanese-Israeli border. That, to me, is a success story. That's how I see it. There's no reason why this country should pay a price for that war, period. I personally, you may disagree. I don't think Hezbollah provides deterrence. I think Hezbollah provides conflict, and a conflict that doesn't originate here. But the Lebanese army, from the moment the armistice treaty was signed, in the 1947 or 48, I think it's 48, or 49, it's one of those years, was applicable until 1969. That's 2 decades. I think that's a success. What happens thereafter is the world we live in right now, where there are paramilitary groups that bring conflict closer to Lebanon. So I don't see any reason for any sub-state group to pretend like it's defending Palestine from Lebanon.
Yeah, but I think the question was more about the ethnic cleansing that's happening in Palestine.
Bring your voice closer to the mic.
It's not. Yeah, I think the question was about correct me if I'm wrong, about the ethnic cleansing that's happening in Palestine, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't have, it goes without saying, like it's unacceptable. Unfortunately, we live in this world. But to comment on Ronnie's point, in 1982, Israel occupied Beirut with the excuse that the PLO existed in Lebanon. And even after the PLO were forced out of Lebanon, Israel stayed in Lebanon from 1982 until the year 2000. So I don't think Israel's intention were very peaceful when it comes to Lebanon. I don't know if you heard me, Ronnie, because you were distracted.
Oh no, I was actually listening closer to you.
Yeah.
I wasn't distracted.
Yeah.
no.
I'm just saying. Whatever happened before 1982, whatever you're saying, I guess what you're saying is that the PLO is the reason Israel occupied Lebanon, or like other factions. But Israel occupied Beirut in 1982 with the excuse that it came here to force the PLO out, and the PLO were forced out of Lebanon in 1982, but it stayed until the year 2000. So
No, I'm saying it actually in reverse, which I misunderstood the question actually.
the question was about Palestine, but I'm commenting on your point.
Okay, I'm going to try to bring them together and play with them. I don't care about Israel's decisions or their judgment, or whether or not they're applying standards that are higher or lower. I don't care about that. It's the fact that there was a Lebanese army at the southern border, and defended Lebanon from being part of a wider conflict. I think that's a good sign, not a bad sign. But Lebanon and Gaza, the leverage Lebanon has, it should not be with a Hezbollah force targeting Israeli sites that they used to target in the 1990s. There's no sub-state legitimacy here. If the Lebanese army wants to play a role that it deserves, not that this is how countries should operate. The Lebanese army should be at the border, defending Lebanese territory from Israel. And when the Israelis attack, it's Lebanon's responsibility to attack, not Iran's. And I don't know, this is hypothetical, I don't know what the Lebanese army's reaction would be in this current state, but I don't want calculations coming from external powers. I don't want to wait for a speech every Friday or every Saturday, waiting. That's not a normal situation.
Just from a factual point of view, I was in a meeting with a senior Lebanese army guy, and he said that the Lebanese army would not intervene unless Israel invades Lebanon by land, part of Lebanon. I mean, some of it is already occupied, but that's what the person said. Or if the Israeli army attacked the Lebanese army deliberately, that's when the Lebanese army would intervene. Just factual information. At least that's what the person told me.
But that's how countries operate. I mean, that's standard practice.
Yeah, but Gaza is it's a Lebanese land. It's occupied. So yeah, just saying. I'm not making an argument here. I'm just saying this is factually what this senior Lebanese army person told me.
Syrian Lebanese army?
Yeah, senior.
Oh, senior. I believe the first one. Are there other questions? The lovely sibling?
Cousin.
Cousin?
Yeah.
Handsome cousin. Just introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, Ali. I'm Wael's cousin. So, and I'm also interested in politics. I'm a part of Memphis as well.
You're still? Memphis
Yes,
as
yes,
in Muwatinun. You're still a member of Muwatinun.
I'm still a member of Muwatinun.
Should we give you a round of applause for that?
So I just finished the podcast, by the way, while driving here.
He means like the MTV podcast.
Yeah. It felt like transcending from the screen and into... Anyways. So, Ronnie, you described yourself as a thinker and not a journalist in the podcast, if I understood well.
That's being too complimentary, and I don't know if a thinker, but just commentator.
That's your own words, but yes.
I'm just phrasing, yeah. So, and the podcast talks a lot about what's the current state and what should be the normal state, but without talking about how to move from A to B. So, and my question is, I agree with you regarding Hezbollah and his dominance over the political scene in Lebanon. We can't agree more. I think the paralysis within the Lebanese politics are all about him. But I think, what's the solution to move from a domination into a state? Is it through foreign interference? Is it through mass gatherings and protests? Is it through armed conflicts?
Revolution.
Or is it through an organized political program that could put on the table an alternative scene or an alternative political narrative talking about health, education, etc.? And if you also consider yourself, I won't use the term thinker again, but where do you stand in terms of how to get from A to B? How do you think the solution is? Because I never knew what's your say on that.
You have a 2-hour episode with Shab al-Nahas if you'd like.
I've heard it, but I want because a lot of context changed since then.
Not really.
Maybe I missed that part.
Muwatinun changed.
Yeah, I'm not talking on behalf of Muwatinun right now.
Yeah,
I'm talking on behalf of myself.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious to know your perspective on that, Wael's perspective on that as well. Because I think we can talk on and on and on and on and on without really putting a context into how would we move from this stage into like a more politically organized state and another narrative than like this is the responsibility of Hezbollah, this is the responsibility of this party. But what should we do?
Sorry, but before you answer, because I thought the question is for Ronnie, I daydreamed for a bit. So
He accuses me of daydreaming, and then he's the one daydreaming.
so the
You want me to, I'll summarize it, don't worry. عن جد العيلة هون is fantastic. It's like, it's exactly where they should be watching you. You should bring more relatives next time. Just the whole family comes. I'll summarize it for you. Everything that we've talked about, and everything I think that we talk about for a living, getting from point A to point B, which is what Muwatinun set itself to do.
like from the current state of Lebanon to a proper state.
I mean, exactly.
Specific to the domination of Hezbollah, how to go out from the domination of Hezbollah. Let's stick to the domination of Hezbollah on the political decision and the political scene. We are living in a zombie political scene, and everything is not. There's no politics exactly, but because of Hezbollah's domination. How to end Hezbollah's domination on the political scene?
You can go first. I'll go after.
I go first.
Before you forget the question.
As I said earlier, I think the problem goes beyond Hezbollah. We are now, experiencing the economic collapse of Lebanon. And at some point, I'm not saying Hezbollah is not part of the political class. Of course it is, and it's a very strong party, and it bears responsibility in what has happened, the corruption, the economic collapse that we are experiencing now. But at some point, the solution would have been an IMF deal. And the solution is not just the money that we would get, the $3 billion from an IMF deal. Other countries promised money for Lebanon if Lebanon gets the stamp of the international community through an IMF deal. And Hezbollah at some point was not opposed to that. The people, and I'm not saying Hezbollah does not bear a portion of responsibility when it comes to this economic collapse. But back then, the people, and until this day, the people who are opposed to the reforms that should happen for Lebanon to have an IMF deal are not just Hezbollah. We know that there's the whole across the whole political class, people are opposed to the reforms, which would include distribution of losses, lifting of secrecy of the bank accounts, stuff like this. So, what is the solution? This is a very deep question. I guess I don't want to say that I am optimistic, but I think with time we had how many MPs? Like changed MPs, 13 or maybe more. Like it depends how you count them. Yeah, and they are not the best representatives of what change should represent. But yeah, I think as time goes by, people become less fearful because the reference is the civil war there. People are fearful of each other. So as time passes and we move forward from the civil war, people will be less fearful of sectarian dynamics. And I think this is where people make rational decisions and would vote in a non-sectarian way, which is a very essential problem of the political scene.
So you watched our episode on MTV, or you listened to it just a few hours ago. When you need to sleep, put Shab al-Nahas on. It's really a good episode. And it won't put you to sleep from the content. It'll put you to sleep because we were so calm. And it was an unusual discussion in that usually there's a sort of a vigor and passion. We were both subdued. He had to wake up his assistant who came, fell asleep on the sofa. It was great. So I think we did the right thing. I'll try to answer your particular question in a few minutes at most. I will acknowledge it's out of step with the more revolutionary minded, and it's also out of step perhaps with the more policy-driven data that Muwatinun, I think, did for a living, and they still do, even in their current state. 3 weeks ago or so, I sat with Muhammad Faour, he's not in Memphis right now, but he was for a long time. I still associate him with that group even when he's not in it, meaning it's the spirit of that group. Yeah, so every document, every policy recommendation, and that substantial literature, I don't think there's another group doing as much work as them. But let's assume it's out of step with them too. That's why I had 2 hours with Shab al-Nahas. And not just him, with Jad Ghassan too, something like 5 times or so. So that's 10 hours, Shad Ghassan. And others as well, other Memphis members. If it's just about how to resolve a paramilitary group in a country, I can only think of other examples where a sub-state force grows into something that's uncontrollable. You need some international leverage, regional understanding, and local appetite, and you need these things to line up, and they haven't lined up. We don't talk about the IRA anymore. It's called Sinn Féin, and it is the IRA, but it's politics only. They have not gone back to fighting, and a generation will pass, the IRA will only be known in history books. There was a Spanish person here earlier, ETA. We don't talk about ETA anymore because ETA disarmed. Over time, we're going to stop talking about the FARC movement in Colombia. Over time. Hezbollah, in the last 40 years, went from a tiny organization, mostly funded and created by Iran, but not entirely, into something that has regional sway through force. This poor little country cannot handle that. And if it does, and it sometimes tries with individuals, it gets killed on the way. So that is a fact. So it's not Lebanon's burden, I think, to try to address what Iran wants from here. It's an impossible mission. And that's where I think the more well-intentioned policymakers, they get caught up in details. They start thinking that, no, it's just about accountability and corruption. And if you just encourage better behavior, Hezbollah will behave better. That's not true. That's simply not true. So there's that dimension. How do you get international understanding to line up with regional politics and at the end also have a local Lebanese appetite for it? That is, I think, a very difficult task. It has to originate from here because otherwise there's no Lebanese voice demanding it. Otherwise, 1701 is pointless. Otherwise, Hezbollah will remain south of the Litani, whether or not there's international agreements to the contrary. It has to originate from here. The last time it semi-originated from here was Michel Sleiman in 2012 from Ba'abda. The Ba'abda Declaration, which went nowhere. Was it 24 hours later? Hezbollah soldiers were in Syria. So that's a meaningless document, but it originates here. When was the last time the US wanted to apply pressure for the sake of Lebanon's sovereignty in a way that makes sense? This is a generation ago. And the last time there was external force applied to sub-state groups in this country was the Civil War. So either, and this is my bet, if Doha in a few months caters more to Iran in Lebanon, you may well see the permanent paralysis you mentioned of politics. I think at this point, you mentioned the IMF deal. There's no IMF deal. There's no port blast investigation. There's nothing like that happening. It's going to be just sitting in this country like Somalians sit in Somalia. And understanding that there's no state that's accountable, we may move in that direction. The leverage that Iran has not been tested in a way for Iran to rethink what it grew here. When that happens, if it happens, and it's done through diplomacy, you may, in the long term, see something working here. And I agree with what Wael said. It's not about Hezbollah here. I fully agree with you. And we had this on MTV. There's a moment where we talked about this. You can't blame voters for voting for this group. Like you can't blame voters for voting for any Lebanese group, especially when Lebanon's politics are dead anyway. And if Hezbollah had better politics, they should be rewarded through elections. That's not an issue for democracy or anything like that. And I always get turned off when people blame voters for Hezbollah, because Hezbollah in its inception was far more popular and far less effective. And Hezbollah today is so unpopular, despite what we talked about, it is immensely unpopular and the most effective it's ever been. It's not about democracy or voting. So I don't blame people for voting for this group. I do blame what Iran's getting away with. Can Lebanon send that message? I don't think so. It has to demand it from here, but you can't take security matters into your own hands in Lebanon. When you do that, you're left with 12 assassinations. You're left with half Bashar al-Assad parking ammonium nitrate. You're left with the worst form of Lebanon. And you're left with idiots like me talking. The worst ending. So all of that is my way of saying shielding Lebanon once and for all is a noble goal. That's a noble mission. And I think that's the only way out of this mess. Otherwise, the more extreme, and some of them have been on my podcast, are eager to tear Lebanon apart. And they're looking for opportunities to sever Lebanon once and for all. That, to me, is exactly what this situation produces. Divorce, hate, violence, and uncontrollable ending to many partitioned Lebanons. That's the worst outcome. So that's my 5-minute answer. Or 6-minute answer. 4.5? I did it. I had someone once answer the history of wine in under 5 minutes, and he pulled it off. I have no idea.
Here?
Right here, right where you're sitting. Michael Karam.
No, I cannot do it.
Neither can I. Huh?
You have the wrong guest.
Are there more questions? Let's do fun questions for Wael, like, his dating life. And Muhammad al-Shama, way in the back. Another badass journalist at the Washington Post.
Hi, Wael. Who's your
Am I
favorite?
alone?
Wait,
Where's your integrity?
since this is only popular questions, who's your favorite Real Madrid football player?
Thank you.
And the history? I don't know. Zidane, definitely. Who clapped?
That got a
It's Clotilde, yeah. She's French.
Who's your current favorite one?
Luka Modric.
Okay.
Yeah. Cristiano doesn't play at Real Madrid anymore. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's the right answer. Other questions like that for Wael? The lady in the back.
Hi, how are you?
Hey,
I'm
Amanda.
Wael's colleague. I'm editor at L'Orient today. And my question is directed to you. You said that Allah has fallen in popularity. What specifically makes you say this? Considering, like, I think from my experiences, I see a lot of people supporting them even more during these times. People that would never end up in a room like this, for example. So I'm just curious to know, what makes you say this?
Didn't catch the first
And do you,
part.
like,
She's
do you
saying
think, yeah.
You said Hezbollah when it cut.
Yeah.
Because your mic cut. I think she's
The
saying,
mic was cutting.
Yeah.
I was saying, what makes you think popularity, like Hezbollah's popularity, has fallen, and not the opposite?
Without scientific data to look at the exact polling numbers, I don't think it's ever been done in this way.
We have elections.
I mean, there's, I think, some variation of that. If you lived here in the 1990s, you were living in a country that was proudly pro-Hezbollah.
The entire country.
Not the entire country, no.
Yeah.
No, I don't think the entire country hates Hezbollah or loves Hezbollah, no. But I think, if my memory serves me right, it was hard to be discriminatory against that group, especially during the 1996 Qana, the Grapes of Wrath War. And when the Israelis left in May 2000, this was a national celebration. Hezbollah had local critics then, and some of it may have been naive in retrospect, but it did have broad appeal. And not just in Lebanon, in the region. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. You probably have. I would travel, I would go to Syria. Speaking of the Syrian regime, you'd have the Syrian and Palestinian flags waving together, and then you'd have Hassan Nasrallah in every single cafe.
Yeah.
So this is real. I think the broad support went all across the region. That's not there right now.
I'd like to hope so. Does Wael think the same?
Yeah, definitely. Hezbollah was way more popular before the year 2000, before 2005 in particular, than it is right now. And as Roni pointed out, after the Syria intervention in the region, Hezbollah in 2006, Nasrallah's posters were lifted all over the Arab region. It's not the case anymore. So, in terms of popularity, I would definitely agree. In the region, in Lebanon, definitely before 2005, everyone supported them, almost everyone.
I don't
Before
know how
2000,
I mean, it's definitely not everyone,
yeah.
but it's
I said almost.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a majority of sympathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because maybe partially because Lebanon was occupied before the year 2000, and it's not the case anymore. I agree.
I think there's a permanent damage done in May 2008 that they'll never escape. That's something they can't come back from that. And if you were here then, you would have seen your own emotions, I think, elevated. You could support Hezbollah on May 6 and then be anti-Hezbollah on May 8 because of what happened in the middle. So there's a shift. And there's a shift, I think, in that even today you have some that are more sympathetic to what they're doing. Maybe they're sympathetic to the actual violence itself. But I think Hezbollah, what it represents, is not more popular as a result. I think it's been on the decline.
Interesting. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Amanda.
Amanda. We have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Hi, I'm Hadi. Hi, Alexei. How are you? Good. Sorry, I think I have a question, but maybe not. I have an opinion to say. I think you said that. Where are you looking there? Sorry.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just, no.
Okay. Sorry, I have an opinion to speak about, and it was about you said that you don't agree or you don't you think that Bassem Youssef shouldn't talk about Palestine in Piers Morgan show, right? Just to understand your point, right?
No. He's allowed to talk. I think he won the popular vote. It's just he's not That's not my way of talking about Palestine. Entertainment to me turns me off.
Yeah, but that's true. I think that's true 100%. But I think the Gazan people, they need someone to speak about what they feel, and anybody. I don't think they need just political people to speak, because they heard the political people since 70 years or maybe less than this, and it didn't go to any way. So I think anybody can speak about Palestine if you have the, how to say it, like the, sorry about my English, it's shit, but I'm trying my best. So I think
اللغة بالعربي إذا بدك ما it's fine.
I think it's so easy. I think Gazan people want someone to say what they feel, and I think Bassem Youssef did, even if it was entertainment or not, because I think Gazan people or Palestinian people, they got bored from political people who speak about the case. They got bored from the political people who speak about the case, so they need someone like them to speak. And I think he spoke well. I'm Palestinian. I'm a refugee in Lebanon. You said also about being a refugee in Lebanon. First, let's solve this. Then we talk about Palestine and things, I think. Like, let's solve first the Palestinian refugees problem in Lebanon. I'm a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon, and I think, in my opinion, I am same as Lebanese. I don't feel there is any difference between me and any Lebanese guy here. I got kind of all my rights. I'm studying in Lebanese university, and I pay for the Lebanese university as like the Lebanese person. And I think I have an apartment, I have everything I want, I'm working, I'm doing my things. So I think also because we choose to go back to Palestine, the right of return, so it's what Lebanese government can do to solve our problems, then solving Palestine. I think solving Palestine problem, then our problem, it's better, because then we can go to Palestine without being in Lebanon. So yeah, this is what I wanted to say.
I agree. I just meant that what Lebanese are able to do here should not be dismissed. And good for you that you have this life, which is
Thank you.
a positive version of the negative version that you know best.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of poor people. I lived in Nahr al-Bared camp in 2007. A war happened. I was there.
Yeah.
Thank God I'm still alive. Then after, I think there is poor people in the Palestinian camps, but also there is poor people in Lebanese people. So I don't think they can do that much for us when their population is not doing great. So yeah, this is what I wanted to say. And about also Hezbollah, it's a curse for Lebanon. I think all the elements, what happened during this period of time, like the 70 years ago, all the elements, they lead us to here. And for Palestine, I'm not sure if Hezbollah is a curse or not yet. But my mother, at least, she says, I don't want Hezbollah to get in the Palestinian case anymore. Even when he said, last 2 weeks, he said that he wasn't a part of the Tufan al-Aqsa. So my mom was so happy about it. They don't want anybody else to get in the Palestinian case or to use it. But at least I think Hezbollah is doing something for the Palestinian case, if just speaking or going one time per week. I think he's still speaking about it, and maybe this is gonna help, because Palestinian people need any hope, like any light of,
I'd rather Bassem Youssef than Hassan Nasrallah.
Yeah, me too, I swear.
And I mean...
Thank you to hear me.
لا,
I
بالعكس,
think I
thank
spoke
you.
a lot.
Thank you.
But I think my voice is nice on the mic. Sorry.
Look at that. That's the weirdest ending to that question. Did not expect that. I might hire you for something, actually. I like your voice, too. And your confidence. Oh, okay. Well, then I don't know. We have time for one more question. The gentleman in the front.
Hi, I'm also a journalist, and I was wondering something about Hezbollah. So I've been living in Lebanon for 1 year, so obviously I don't know anything, I don't know everything about it. But when the war happened, pretty quickly, L'Orient Le Jour came, released some stories about Hezbollah the guardian of the Iranian revolution, and like many people and from Hamas gathering in Beirut about like the Hamas attack on the October 7th. And Nasrallah said these attacks were 100% Palestinians. I was wondering, what do you think about that? Is that a way to get Hezbollah out of the war? Like, what's your analysis of the speech of Hassan Nasrallah about getting Hezbollah not really involved in these attacks for Palestinians?
So you work at the EC Beirut, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Do you know them well?
no, I know the news outlet. So what Nasrallah said in his first speech after October 7 is that they had no idea. They didn't have a clue about the Hamas operation. Iran has said it had no idea about the Iran operation. Hamas themselves said the senior members did not know about the Hamas operation. Hezbollah said they didn't know about the Hamas operation. The American intelligence said Iran did not know about the Hamas operation. The French intelligence said they did not know about the Hamas operation. So I don't have a strong opinion on this, but I tend to believe it, especially when you see Hezbollah's reaction in the first days. On October 7, they didn't have any reaction. If they did, maybe they would have had a tactic somehow. October 9 was the first attack on empty farms, and then they got more involved later. And Nasrallah spoke 3 weeks after, and I think the reason for that is that Hezbollah did not know what to do. So personally, if I'm analyzing here, it's not a factual thing. I tend to believe that claim.
I'll only add, I think the terminology was there's every country with a spokesperson was saying there's no direct involvement, which leads to the assumption of what does indirect involvement mean. And clearly this operation, if it was planned, I think if you look at it over time, Hamas, I think, got away with much more than they imagined. And I think this was definitely, if you think of the best case scenario and the worst case scenario for them, I don't think they were ready for the best case scenario. And this, I think, leads us to everything that's happened. But indirect involvement, I think, is why Iran indirectly negotiates over hostages in Doha. That's indirect involvement. Direct, I mean, I take your word for it. There's probably no direct, but these are words that you can play with a bit. And I think indirect is leverage to trying to find a way out with Iran rather than full-scale war, which didn't happen, which everyone was talking about. I think there were a lot of messages communicated to de-escalate rather than create a war in the South. So that, I think that happened. And that's the result of indirect responsibility. We could squeeze in one more if it's a light question for Wael, if it's a fun one. No? No one has fun questions for
It's fine.
I want the family to do one more. Anyone in the family. The brother. Yes, right there. Yes, for your brother. They don't. I love this. You should be proud of him.
The sister.
Oh, the sister, yes, please.
Wael, when did you feel that you want to become a journalist?
That's a good question. I did not expect it from you.
No, I'll ask the question to the family and then you can. Does he win in family disputes? What does he sort
Not at all. Not
You
at
always
all.
lose?
It's as if I'm illiterate in the family. Like I'm the youngest in the family.
You're the illiterate journalist in the family.
Yeah. The journalist thing doesn't get taken into consideration. It reminds me of Lewis Hamilton, the Formula One driver. He used to say that his father believed that he is a better driver than him. So it's the same thing. When did I want to become a journalist? I don't know. I really don't. I cannot identify the moment. As I said, the political awakening came in 2005 when Rafi al-Hariri was assassinated, and Lebanese politics became more interesting after. And since then, I've been following like a geek about Lebanese politics. So somewhere between the lines.
He answers more in the MTV episode. You described yourself as a political geek in 2005. He goes into it a bit.
Yeah.
I want to wrap it up by mentioning somebody who left early. He was sitting at the bar. He's gone. A very quiet artist who left Lebanon. His name is Jad al-Khouri. Jad al-Khouri, if you remember Burj al-Mur, when they put the curtains on Burj al-Mur and it was flapping for several days, that was him. If you've been to the Egg in the last few years, you'll see colored paint all over the ceiling, the top end. That's him. All these odd cartoonish comic book characters on the Holiday Inn Hotel, and actually throughout the city. That's him. He left to Norway, and he came back just to do an exhibit in Marim Khayil on November 29. So I told him to tell me before he leaves if he had to leave. It's in Gallery Tanit. Go there if you have time. It's 2 Wednesdays from today in the evening. You'll like his work, especially now that he's trying to reconnect a bit with the country. Also, next week is Simone Kashar, an AUB political science professor, to talk about independence on Lebanon's Independence Day, and also going deep into Fuad Shahab. So if anyone's curious about this country's lost independence or its unique president, Fuad Shahab, that's next week. Wael, in any setting, whether I see you on the street in a protest, when I see you late at night here drunk, when I sometimes...
This is water, guys.
When that's not water. Oh, by the way, he did something weird. He got tea and then a martini right after. Yeah. I've seen this man in difficult circumstance and also in a good mood. He always has the same energy. You should keep it. It's very attractive. I'd like to do this again with you. Bring the whole family next time. And thanks to everyone for talking and engaging a very difficult subject this way. It means a lot to me. So, the Beirut Banyan on social media, Wael Taleb Ramzi or Wael Ramzi Taleb?
On Instagram, Wael Taleb 23 on Twitter.
On Twitter. Follow Wael. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Good job. Great job. Thanks for listening and watching. And a friendly reminder to support this podcast by contributing through Patreon or PayPal. All links are in the details box. Until next time, I'm Rani Shatah, and this is the Beirut Banyan.